Ready or not, here we come. It's the very first episode of Minnesota Opera's first podcast, The Score. On this week's episode, Black people talking about opera. What is this? Who are these people? And why? All these questions answered and more. Also, there's a new diversity officer at the Metropolitan Opera. Let's celebrate her and pray for her. Plus, we'll touch on recent controversies in Paris and Indiana, and as always, send you into the weekend with a PB&J, a moment of pure Black joy. You know what time it is. It's time to check the score. Let's do it to it. Everybody, it's episode 1 of The Score! Wait, that's the one I was going for. I was like, what is that? What is that? Anyway, we're off to a great start. Welcome, everyone. I've forgotten what sounds sound like. We're so excited to be here. This is The Score. This is Minnesota Opera's first podcast. And we are 3 Black arts administrators, arts aficionados, friends, artists, and we are here to really amplify Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, trans, non-binary, everybody else's voices, and bring them into the tent of classical music and opera, and we're so happy to have you all here. My name is Rocky Jones. I am the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Director at Minnesota Opera.
My name is Paige Reynolds. I'm the Civic Engagement Manager at Minnesota Opera.
And I'm Bynum. I am the Vice President for Impact, also at Minnesota Opera.
Well, hi, y'all. How are y'all doing today?
Not too bad. A rare day without snow. It's a good one so far.
I mean, good Lord.
So the snow is melting here, so that's better than before.
That's true. It's just mind-boggling when we get to this like part of the year, because it just feels like it's never going to end. Like the snow will always be here, it will always be cold. But of course, I mean, it's late February, so we've got like a couple of blizzards left in us. So
absolutely,
let me not speak too soon.
Yay.
I know we're not done yet.
So people are probably wondering, like, what is this? Who are these people? Why are these Black folks sitting here, like, talking about opera, classical music? What's going on? And so, we just thought, like, at first, the first thing, like, why don't we just sort of introduce ourselves and just sort of what the score is and what we're doing here? So, Lee, I'll pass it over to you.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Bynum again. I'm very new in the role. I only was hired last fall. I started in October. And prior to that, I spent quite a bit of time working in philanthropy and higher ed. But I'm so excited to be back with my first love, classical music. I grew up in Virginia, right outside of Richmond. And I spent a lot of my childhood in orchestras and theaters, and also dabbling a bit in opera and a little bit in dance. You really couldn't tell if you ever saw me move now, but I really did take dance class for several years. Just didn't take.
I'm sure you're fabulous.
Yeah, let's go with
graceful
that.
as a swan.
Yeah,
Swan,
I have
pigeon.
been. Well, you all know I have been on this health kick lately, so I've been taking these dance classes on YouTube, and my almost 40-year-old body does not move the same way. So I feel you.
Yeah, we should definitely devote a whole podcast one day to things that bodies do when they hit 40. So I actually just had a birthday last week.
Aquarius.
Certainly the age of Aquarius. I'm an Aquarian, and my rising is Aquarian, and my moon is Aquaria. It's a whole experience, really. Not that our audience is that interested in that part, but it might be useful context later. if I start
'cause,
saying
like-
a series of non sequiturs.
Yeah, because I mean, like you're like triple weirdo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You say something real off the wall, we'll just be like, no, that's the triple Aquarius talking. It's fine.
Well, yeah, we definitely might have to go with it from time to time. So I'm moving to Minnesota in exactly 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. Very excited. I've been here in Harlem for quite some time. I moved to Harlem in the late 90s for college and fell in love with it. And I've been here ever since with a few fairly brief year-long stints abroad, most notably in Hong Kong, which was one of my all-time absolute favorite experiences. But outside of this work that I've described, we've also been working in the EDI side of the performing arts since around 2001. I started a nonprofit theater company with a group of friends as a college student, and it was really focused on what at the time was called multicultural theater. Now I think it's just called theater, which is a really nice thing. And
Thank goodness.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Thank
Okay.
goodness.
made a little bit of movement in that area. And since 2015, I've been working with a group called the Dream Unfinished Orchestra, which is an activist orchestra here in New York, which was the piece that got me, again, in classical music, really thinking about these issues. And maybe a couple of years ago, I started thinking about I would love to work for an opera company doing progressive work around inclusion, access, equity, and diversity. And when I saw this position come up last summer, I thought, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And honestly, given the really trying time that the Twin Cities has had since the murder of Mr. Floyd, I've also felt like this is where I wanted to do the work. I want to be where people are really thinking about how do we have a different kind of society than we have now. And I think classical music is an extraordinary, untapped tool to do that work. So I'm super happy to be here. I love working with the two of you as well as our other colleagues, and it's just been a really tremendous experience being welcomed to the Minnesota Opera family. So thanks, everybody.
Well, we are blessed. Blessed.
Yay!
You are here with us. Snaps. Snaps
Yes, yes, yes. All right, I guess I'll introduce myself. So I'm Paige. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns.
for you. Yes.
Oh gosh, I came to Minnesota Opera in 2018 now. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Time just
Wow.
flies. It's so crazy.
What in the world? Yeah.
Good God. It
That's
just seems
like-
like just okay. Keep going.
I was saying it so slowly because I thought about it and I was like, no, surely I'm wrong. Surely I'm wrong. But no, since 2018 now.
I think it's just the 2020 of it all. Like it
Oh, for
still
sure.
feels like I'm just like
sure.
sitting here and it's March 2020.
Facts.
And it's like, no, honey, it is March 2021.
A whole year
2020
just
felt like 3
evaporated.
years. So yeah, since 2018, and before that, I came to the Twin Cities on a fellowship actually with children's theater. I had just graduated from Howard University about a year before, and yeah, woo-woo,
What?
HU,
Bison what?
you know, shout out to the Bison out there. What's up, fam? In case you don't know, we're real extra. But I love it. I loved that experience at Howard as a theater arts administration major. But along with theater, one of my loves has always been music. I was always a choir kid and a theater kid. I was actually a choir kid before I was a theater kid, and music just played throughout my home growing up of every genre. I once commented to a friend that, like, you know how some families or like some kids grow up on like children's music? That was not a thing. We just listened to what our parents listened to. There was no children's music. There was, we're listening to gospel, to rock, to grunge, to funk, to spirituals, everything.
Everything.
And so I just grew up with an appreciation for it all. And when it came time for like college and stuff, it was really between voice or theater. And I still hold a love for both, absolutely. But I did choose theater, and it's just funny to me that like I ended up coming back right around to classical music.
Funny how that works.
Right, real funny how that works. She was like, Universe was just like, okay, so you're not gonna major in voice. We're gonna make sure we put music back in your life in some way. So
absolutely,
it's funny
and
how
thank
things
goodness
work.
for it.
Yeah, for real, for real. I'm grateful for it. So yeah, now I've been in the Twin Cities for about 3.5 years now overall, and I love my role at Minnesota Opera. I also do some arts-based community organizing outside of that. I recently became a doula.
Yes.
Yeah, so you girls real multifaceted over here. At least I try to be.
Well, I guess I'll go next. My name is Rocky Jones, and I am originally from the Washington, D.C. area. I also grew up in the suburbs in Virginia, much like Lee. And my parents went to Howard, much like Paige. So I don't know. I feel like I'm going to, end up sort of repeating a lot of the same things that both of you have said. But, I grew up just super theater nerd, drama kid, like all I wanted to do. My sister actually was an actress, my older sister. And I remember, being a kid and just wanting to do everything that she did. So the first second I could, I was up on a stage singing, dancing, all of that stuff. And also taking a lot of music classes. I remember distinctly, I think I was in second grade, and my mother walked by my room, and I was just in my room by myself playing with my stuffed animals, like singing to them, and she comes running in and she's like, my baby can sing, my baby can sing.
That's too cute.
And so from that moment on, I was in voice lessons after school all the time, and so that led me to classical music. And so I went to college in New York City, really, wanting to focus on theater. Afterwards, I moved back to the DC area, ended up in a kind of not really sure what direction I wanted to go in. But I know that I had experienced my first heartbreak and discovered whiskey and cigarettes and my guitar. And so I was in bands, just sort of playing in coffee shops up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And all that, led me to, my now husband, who is a native Minnesotan, and brought me here. And as I was really trying to figure out like what my next direction was, I had taken a brief 7-year detour into design, and I really, really missed having music being as part of my daily practice. So when I found a position at the opera, I jumped on it and eventually worked my way up to communications manager. So I was doing a lot of the video work here at the opera. But around the same time, we were really starting to have conversations talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion issues in the opera industry and classical music as a whole. And so I really jumped on that because, for me, theater and music for my entire life have been really those things that have, even at times just really saved my life and made me feel really connected to my friends, my family, the world in general. And, it's always been really important to me to be able to open up these doors and these avenues to people who might not necessarily feel like, classical music is for them. And so I was really excited to start having these conversations. I joined our, what was then in 2016, our new diversity council, ended up taking over as chair, and with Paige and a couple of other folks, really developing what became our charter, our diversity charter, where we as a company committed ourselves to creating art and creating spaces through an anti-racist and anti-oppressive lens, which, especially here in Minnesota after 2020, that we have had here in the Twin Cities in particular, is more important than ever. And so now we've got Lee here, we've got Paige in the civic engagement manager position, and we're doing it, and we're here, and we're ready to spread this message with this podcast and welcome everybody into our spaces of refuge and healing and hope. And I'm really excited.
Likewise. Yes, really excited. I think that just at this time to have these spaces where we can, have some joy, some laughter, some good times, but also have good real talk.
Yeah.
Is really important. That just feels good right now. I mean, it's already, tough enough dealing with the cornucopia of issues that are just, constantly with us right now. But, to then act like it's not happening on top of that would be more difficult even. So I'm just super grateful for this space and real excited for what we're going to get into.
For sure. And, I think historically art has been a way that people have dealt with these sort of issues, right? Like these deep, intractable issues that are facing so many communities. The art is an amazing outlet, both to address them, to sort of purge the feelings you have, and then also to imagine a different kind of a world, right? And I think just given everything that we saw in the last couple of years, I personally felt like it made sense to shift from philanthropy to going back into the arts, right? And you think of philanthropy as a space that is fundamentally designed to solve problems. And I think that is not an untrue statement, right? But because the currency of philanthropy is money, it brings its own challenges, right? Like there is a tremendous responsibility in that space that is also kind of a political responsibility, and it's not a space of creation, right? And as we move through last year, and honestly everything that happened since November of 2016, I was thinking more and more, what does it look like to do something for real? And given my interest and skill sets, like coming to an organization like this was a no-brainer for me. It was complicated because there are not a lot of institutions like the one for which we work. But the minute I identified this opportunity, I knew that there was a lot of really fantastic work that we'd be able to do together. So I also am extremely grateful for both of you and for our other colleagues. This is like a very interesting love fest. And people who don't work at Minnesota Opera, hopefully they will all now think, oh my God, I really want to work there. Sounds awesome. But it really has been such a positive experience to be able to have a lot of honest conversations with what the art looks like in a moment like this.
Well, I will say, though, that as much as, this has been a love fest, the conversations that we're having now were not the conversations that we were having 4 years ago.
I'm sure.
And, it took, quite a bit of work to get here, which I'm really excited about, especially as a Black person in this space, being able to have the freedom to really delve into these topics and to have the support of our organization it's just kind of a godsend. And so, my hope really is as we move forward, being able to bring more people into the space and meet more artists and all of those, folks who are out here really just like changing the game, and allowing for more of us to be in this space, and to have those conversations about how and why. It's just, today I'm just feeling so optimistic and excited. I'm a Sagittarian, so so I'm the well, you're a Sagittarius too, Paige. So we'll be optimists together.
True. I like to think of it as radical optimism.
There you go.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
But I'm also a Gemini rising, so I can change on a dime.
Well, I was raised by two Sagittarians, so I am very familiar with your people, and I'm prepared for everything that will bring.
You were raised by two Sagittarians.
Yeah, so funnily enough, there are 6 people in my immediate family and only 4 birthdays. My parents had the same birthday a year apart. And my mom told me this really funny story when she met my dad, and they were having a conversation. And he asked her when her birthday was, and she was like, November 24th. And he was like, oh, that's mine too. And then she was like, of course I didn't believe him. It just sounded like something a man would say. But my sisters are identical twins, so of course they have the same birthday. And they are also Howard alumni. So there was a lot of Howard, a lot of Sagittarius, and a lot of Aquarius happening on this one podcast, although I guess I'm all of the Aquarius. But I'm a lot of people.
I actually also have an Aquarius moon.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. So
Let the weirdness begin.
Ooh, it's going to get weird. All right, so we're back. And so every episode, we're going to start off with sort of, for lack of a better term, a hot topics segment. Please don't sue us, The View or The Read or any of those places. I'm sure we will come up with a brilliant name for this segment. But we just want to highlight some of the issues, topics, big stories that are going on in the world of classical music that are affecting people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, queer folks, everybody. So this week we want to talk about the Metropolitan Opera in New York, which is the largest performing arts institution in the country. And they have hired a new diversity officer, Miss Marcia Sells.
Yay.
Who,
Yay.
yes, good for her. Let's also pray for her, but good for her. And this is the first position of its kind at the Met, which is, you know, the gold standard for opera companies here in the U.S., for performing arts companies, really, here in the U.S. And so that's a really exciting bit of news, a really daunting bit of news, because like she's got a lot to deal with after the last couple of years of goings on at the Met. But yeah, I mean, you know, Lee, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts about Miss Marcia Sells?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited about her appointment. One, that they have this position at all. So right before I started at Minnesota Opera, the position went online, and the consultant reached out to me to sort of gauge my interest, because I think the number of folks who are senior, who are working in this space, especially EDI and classical music, it's not huge, right? So I would imagine that there are a lot of people who got that call. And, you know, even if I hadn't already taken this particular position, it was something that sounded incredibly daunting, right? Between the reputation of the organization, which is so outsized in the space, and also the resources that it has and everything that accords in terms of how people look to it. I knew this would be very, very complicated, right? There's not much that can happen at the Met that doesn't end under someone's microscope, right? But at the same time, Ms. Sells is uniquely positioned, I think, to be able to do really extraordinary work in this space. For instance,
her resume alone is just crazy.
I mean, that's what I'm saying, right? She's the former dean of students at Harvard Law, which must have been its own very heavy lift in and of itself, right? It's
I mean, an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn.
absolutely.
She's probably seen some things.
I mean, I just,
She has seen some things.
I can only imagine.
And unflappable, resilient, tenacious. You know, these are all understatements, even without having met her, right? And I feel like looking to who can be good mentors for all of us for the kind of work we want to do, I already anticipate that she will be, you know, a shining star in the field. And I think her appointment, along with Afton Battle at Fort Worth Opera as their executive director in a field where we don't see a lot of women, and we certainly don't see a lot of Black women having that particular opportunity. I think it's so incredibly exciting, right? And I think it means that
Absolutely.
there's a different kind of work as a field that we can do. But what do y'all think about it? How did the news strike you, considering that you were already in this space at the time she was appointed?
Yeah, my first reaction was good for the Met, good for her.
Yeah.
And I hope she has a team behind her because, I mean, I think just one of the things that I've experienced is that it's such an important and great step to hire folks like her.
Yeah.
And it's another thing for them to actually be able to implement change. And, you know, that can be the harder part, the actual changing of organizational culture and reprioritization of your values and, you know, what you want to accomplish. So good first step. And I hope that, you know, she continues to be supported.
Yeah.
To echo your sentiments, I felt, immense joy and excitement. But I also felt like a little bit of trepidation because, you really do need to have those resources, have that support in order to get anywhere in this work. And, an institution that is just sort of as huge and lauded as the Met, they have, a quote unquote, reputation to uphold. And, I know that like as a, Black queer man, coming into this role at Minnesota Opera, I felt a lot of pressure. And so I wondered if she felt, or if she feels rather, that same kind of pressure to really come in and, clean house and make those changes that need to be made and have those tough conversations that need to be had. And it can be like such a scary, daunting thing if you don't feel like, you have a safe place to land at the end of the day. And so I just wish that for her that, I obviously do not know the inner workings of the Met. But I do hope that like she's being given, a wide berth to make decisions, to walk into, those folks' offices who need to be told a couple of things.
For sure. For sure.
And being able to feel safe to have those conversations and do those things. But I would imagine, given her background, that she could walk into any space and say whatever she wants. So.
and I think that, Miss Sells, if you're listening, I hope you are, you have an open invitation here on the score. And also
Come on the pod.
Yes. Come talk to us.
A tremendous amount of support from here across the country. We are certainly rooting for you. And as Rocky said, also praying for you because it is not easy. It is not easy work. And it's also a super complicated transition, even coming out of a space where you're doing a lot of this work. Classical music has its own very specific intentional history around exclusion, and it mirrors that of academe, but they're not completely the same, right? I think the fact that academia has been engaged in a very real legal conversation around how to make diversity happen since the late 70s puts it in a different place, right? So I think, this is not going to be without challenges, but, this is also work that needs to happen and a lot of people are very supportive of it.
Yeah, speaking of I mean, that's support and hoping she has a wide enough purview to enact some change. It was encouraging to me to see that that the board and working with the board will fall under her responsibilities.
Yeah.
That can be a place where, you know, you can get a lot of support, or it could be the hardest to change, or both. A mix of both a lot of the time, honestly. and just that, you know, within her first several, I guess, months, or however long it would take with an institution as big as the Met, but coming up with those new plans for artistic planning and for engagement, and it seems like there's a pretty, you know, wide plate of things to work with that they're giving her. So that was encouraging to see, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but, you know, I just imagine, like, it's hard enough at our little, you know, Midwestern opera company to get all that stuff done. I can only imagine, you know, a space as big as the Met. But, you know, more power to her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. More power to all of us.
Well, you know, there you go.
I know that's right.
I'll take some of that.
But, you know, I can't wait to see what she does. I can't see, you know, but not to add any more pressure.
Right.
but I'm just looking forward to it, because, you know, everything that happens at the Met has a tendency to trickle down to all of us. And so I'm excited.
Well, I'll tell you what I hope trickles. I know that the Met has programmed Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which is Charles Blow's opera, and I love Charles Blow. I have a absolute obsession with everything that he does, and Jesse Montgomery's new opera as well. And I hope some of that trickles, right? You don't see a lot of places programming multiple pieces by composers of color in the same season, or even in the same stretch of 2 or 3 years. So that to me is super exciting. And, you know, I'm sad I'll be leaving New York at the moment when something like that is happening, but I'm not sad that I'm leaving New York at the same time. It was time.
Yeah, and I think I'm excited about those productions, and to see how the Met rethinks access to that work, especially. I mean, I've said it, I've heard others say it. One thing about the pandemic is that a lot of folks have been forced to put their content online and make it more accessible than ever before. That has certainly been true with the Met. I thought I would not get to see Porgy and Bess, that latest production. I just thought that I had missed that train, and yo, that was it. Like, too bad. But they showed it several times streaming for free. And so I did get to see that, and several others, and I remember just sharing it with friends and family that was even available. Black History Month recently too. I think they did 2 weeks of, at least 2 weeks of free streaming of operas with Black leads, Black principal artists. And I remember sharing it, and it's not like what I post on social media is that popular, but like, it's not like, but lots of people were just like, oh, this seems cool, and like reposted it and liked it and all of that stuff. And so I was like, see, we're interested. We want to know about these things. It's a lot of the time the access that is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. The interest is there. You know, I feel like it cannot be overstated, the interest that Black people have in Black excellence in any permutation. You know what I mean? I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, I remember, you know, Tiger Woods' prayers to him after his accident yesterday, Tiger Woods first coming around, and the Williams sisters, and Black people showing an interest in tennis and golf that I hadn't seen in my lifetime, right? And same thing with Gabby Douglas and Simone Biles, right? Suddenly Black people owned talking about gymnastics, and I feel like we're just another Black figure skater away from all kinds of memes. So.
I mean, I remember in the late 90s, you know, was that when Tiger Woods?
I feel like it, right?
I think that's right, right?
Yeah.
You know, my dad had never, I had never seen him watch golf, play golf, heard him say a word about golf. And then now all of us, still to this day, like he'll call me up like, did you see Tiger this weekend? You saw Tiger this weekend?
Oh, I feel like with tennis now, you really won't be able to tell us nothing with
absolutely.
Naomi Osaka.
Naomi.
Absolutely.
Yes, I love her. I was like, you can't tell us nothing. Tennis is ours now. It's just what it is. Like, I don't know who actually started tennis, but we black people now believe it was us, and we will.
And, and I think, there are a lot of people who don't necessarily realize that black people have been contributing in major ways to opera and classical music since the beginning, and, feel free to go onto Minnesota Opera's Instagram because we've been highlighting all of those people all throughout Black History Month. That's me plugging. But, amazing, amazing singers and composers, Jesse Norman, Leontine Price, all of these incredible people that we have to look up to. And I'm just so excited, that we have this opportunity now, especially, with Miss Sells at the Met, with us in our positions here in Minnesota, with all the Black people who are now finding themselves in opera companies, Afton Battle, all of these, EDI positions that are opening up, like what the future of this could look like. Who is going to be the Serena Williams of opera? Who's going to be the Tiger Woods? And it feels like a whole new world is opening up.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And while we're plugging the social media, I'll encourage everybody to check out some of the composers we've been featuring. We've really thought about giving people the laurels they deserve while they're still here. So there have been a number of living composers, the aforementioned Jesse Montgomery, Tyshawn Sori, Nkiru Okoye, Courtney Bryan, that we have been highlighting their work as well and support them, show them some love, and let them know how appreciated their work is now while they are still here to hear about it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating, illuminating conversation. I'm sure we will have, much more in the coming weeks. More music, more composers, more singers, more opera, more Black excellence to share with everyone. And I know we keep saying it because it's our first episode, but I'm so excited. Say it with me. Excited.
So excited.
Cue the Pointer Sisters.
Jump for my love. Doing the neutron dance. All right, we're back, everyone. And as we all know, the Black Lives Matter movement has become a worldwide movement here on Earth. Not just here in the Twin Cities, but it has spread its reach all the way over to Paris. And recently we got word that the Paris Opera has vowed to overhaul its recruiting practices and launch a greater drive towards diversity. And of course, there has been quite a bit of controversy, especially from right-wingers who are accusing the opera's new general director, Alexander Neef, of introducing sort of an American-style, quote-unquote, culture war into its art scene, which is crazy, of course. But we just wanted to sort of bring this up because I think it really does mirror, a lot of just some of the crazy things that we, especially as EDI professionals here in the States, a lot of the arguments that we are having to field, and especially on social media, just about how the push for diversity is really sort of alienating white audiences. And so, also tied into this is a very controversial job listing that was recently put out into the world by the Indianapolis Museum of Art. The head of that institution has been, I guess he was fired or he quit. I'm not exactly sure. He resigned. All right. Mm-hmm. But basically, a job listing for a new EDI director, manager, and basically saying that, like, yes, your job will be to recruit new audiences and staff members and donors of color while maintaining our quote unquote core white audience. And so, with both of these things in the news, I just wanted to turn it over to y'all. What are some of y'all's initial reactions to this? And Paige, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, one of the things that immediately came to my mind to remember, especially with Paris Opera and their efforts, which sound well intentioned, and the pushback that they're getting, is it's just a reminder that the what we've seen in the past few years here in America with like the rise of like far right wing like white supremacy, basically white supremacist terrorism, and there being like this mass mobilization of folks who hold those ideologies, and online recruiting. Even there's a problem with like the YouTube content just being saturated with white supremacist propaganda. Like that is a global problem right now. So I think like we're US based. I assume that a lot of our listeners will be, so I think it's important to put it in that global context. Like it's not just us right now. Like unfortunately, like this is what happens when we ignore it for so long and don't attack the core of the problem. Like it's a global issue of just like sweeping like right-wing fascism happening. So this is not surprising at
No,
all.
not in the least. Sad to say.
All.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and especially when you think about America's origins and where people come from here, like you looking at nations like France and like the UK or Italy and stuff like that. That's the origin story of this, like, of like this global racism that we have now. Like, that is literally the origin. So it's totally unsurprising to me.
It's both unsurprising, and I feel like it's like bringing out a lot about the context of blackness in various places, right? And how it shifts based on who is there, when we got there, how we got there, and then the level of disruption majority populations sort of project onto our being in a space, right? And the thing that was so interesting to me about how folks are framing this is that Alexander Neef is coming to Paris very recently from Toronto, right? And you know the Canadian Opera Company has not necessarily been the most progressive one out there. So I was very curious about how he would be received there, given Toronto is one of the most diverse cities on the planet, right? And you know, seeing perhaps how that experience would have prepared him for this. I'm not super surprised, right, that I feel like people are probably just projecting a lot of what they have determined as like this American racial framework onto their own context, which is much easier than actually delving into their own problematic practices. And that's what's so disappointing about the whole affair, honestly. But it's also a reminder of where we are, right? And however much we feel like certain progressive conversations are moving forward in classical music, there is still a lot of deep entrenchment against what it is that we would like to see happening, you know. And I am very lucky to have my husband reminding me of this like on a daily basis, right? There are a lot of purists out there who will be threatened by any semblance of change, and I think this is what we're seeing.
Well, you know, it's fascinating because, you know, the Paris Opera is around 350 years old. That's older than the United States of America. So to turn around and call this like an American problem, or like, you know, some sort of like American style revolution or whatever that's happening, it's like, no, honey, no, no, no. That's not what's happening here. You know, and I think this, like, coupled with, you know, the situation in Indianapolis, provides this sort of fascinating framework in that I think they're two sides of the same coin. Because, like, I see sort of the Indianapolis thing as sort of, you know, I can just imagine somebody saying, like, well, I mean, the thing is that we really do need to just sort of name what it is. Like, it's an it's important. It's important to name, to be really honest about what we're doing, because like our core audience is white and we don't want to scare them away. And so this person's job is going to be making sure that those people aren't scared.
Yeah, I think they're both examples of like accidentally saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to be clear that in both cases, it isn't just about keeping an audience comfortable or programming something that they like, whether it's in Indiana and their core white audience, or whether it's in Paris. Like, it's not just about keeping them comfortable. What we're really fighting against is like keeping a dominant narrative that has been oppressive to people of color, to disabled people, to queer people, to whoever. So it's beyond just, you know, their comfort or them not feeling like every piece is going to make them feel guilty, or, oh, this is white guilt. Like, it's not even about that. Like, zoom out. Like, it's about it's about a whole uplifting and upholding a whole narrative. And we're seeing where that has gotten us. That has gotten us to the January 6th moments. We've gotten us to the Derek Chauvin moments. Just have to name that.
Yeah, it's another permutation of something we're seeing all over the world right now, right? And I think anytime you're in a situation where the actual mechanics of where the power sits, and when that shifts, I think you see these moments of people sort of grasping, right, for anything they can, any way to hold on. You know, as we were talking about earlier, like, there's so many spaces that used to be all white, where now you see all kinds of other folks being extremely dominant, or at least being completely conversant in ways that we were not permitted to be in the past, right? And I think that this is just another place where you're seeing that.
You know,
and even when we
go ahead.
I was gonna say, and even when we create our own too, unfortunately, not just, you know, infiltrating white spaces, but then even when we build it ourselves, it's like, wait, but you weren't supposed to. You weren't supposed to be reliant upon us. You're supposed to do what we were supposed to say you do. Like, that's not what we meant when we said don't use our stuff. We didn't mean to go then build your own.
Right. Boxer braids.
Oh, Lord Jesus. Oh, gosh. But, you know, I think about, like, you know, the work that we did here last year in Minnesota when we were creating our anti-racism charter. And, you know, the pushback that we received was similar. I mean, I feel like the voices weren't dominant, but like I remember having a conversation with some other members of staff who had gone out and, you know, they were selling tickets, fundraising, whatnot, and hearing back from patrons, hearing back from a small minority of very vocal donors who are very sort of afraid of, you know, some of the things that, you know, this Guardian article about the Paris Opera had mentioned, that they were afraid that there were, you know, parts of the repertoire that were going to go away, that there were, you know, certain, you know, if we brought, you know, people in who were, you know, people of color or disabled or, you know, trans and non-binary, having them sing these sort of traditionally straight white roles, that somehow that would take away. And so that we felt as though it was important in that charter to include an artistic statement of belief, where we were just like, no, by like opening this up, we're actually like elevating the art that we're doing, by increasing our tent. But I wonder how you all react to this idea that like, oh, the repertoire will be changed in some sort of adverse way, because that seems to be the big argument. And of course, I think it's BS.
Yeah.
Obviously, but I'm curious, what your immediate reactions are as, classical music
Well,
savants.
I'll say
extraordinaire.
this with my historian hat on, right? The even if the art doesn't change, society changes, right? And how we receive things shifts, and also how we may wish to engage with things shifts. And I think that one of the things that I love so much about art is that it's not static. And as we move through the ways that we may wish to think about the issues that are brought up with generative art, like opera, that definitionally is meant to be performed and then reperformed and then interpreted and reinterpreted by increasingly different and new groups, we have to be nimble in terms of how we think about what the messaging is, right? So if you take something like Madame Butterfly, where sort of unproblematically people have been presenting this piece for 100 years in yellowface casting whichever soprano who may wish to be cast in it. We are in a situation now where I think the conversation is there a version of Madame Butterfly that we can watch right now that can exist without a woman of Asian descent singing the lead role? Like, are we in any place where there is an appetite for that? And I can only answer that for myself, right? But I think the bigger answer is that this is a thing that may shift. The answer for today may not be the answer for 20 years from now, and it certainly isn't the answer from 20 years ago. And I think one of the things that we as people who appreciate art forms like this have to be prepared for is that this is something of a moving target, right? And in specific places at specific times, the answer may be different. I know for me right now, I'm not interested in seeing a Madame Butterfly that is not cast to reflect what was actually written, right? And I think what is written is that this is a story that is very much focused on a particular place and focused on a particular set of dynamics between different racialized groups. And I don't think it would make sense in an all-white production. I don't think it would make sense in an all-black production either. Where we may be 10 years from now could be totally different, right? And maybe I would be a great choice for Cho-Cho-san 10 years from now. But at least for right now, I'm working on it in the shower.
Give us a little.
But I think that's the thing people aren't always comfortable hearing, right? That this is not something that there's an easy answer. And I think people frequently are looking to us to give them the silver bullet, right? The one thing they can say or do to give them the cover to be able to produce ways that may or may not be responsible. And I think that is not really what's happening right now. People are looking for companies to be accountable and thoughtful about what they're doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also want to say, I think one way to, well, first let me lead with, it's hard for me to to sometimes like meet this question or this conversation with understanding or with gentleness for people who really love the classic opera canon. But it's tough because I just see myself so, or rather I don't see myself in it.
Yeah.
Beyond music that's beautiful and moving, and there are even some stories that I really love, but there are new stories being created that I also love all the time. So that do more represent me or the kind of world I'd like to see, or even if it displays a more dystopian or patriarchal or racist world, it's aware that it's doing so and has a message and, has a message about that. So it's hard for me sometimes because I want to be like, I get it. But I'm also like, man, make some new stuff. Like, there are so many people out here creating beautiful music or beautiful stories, and we'll continue to always. Like, that's just what we do as humans. Like, we cannot help it. So that'll always be a thing, but I also get it with the classic repertoire and why, it has a place, and what it says about our history also. It can be interesting to me as a history nerd, as someone who loves the dramaturgy, is all of that. And I think when it comes to, like, getting real experimental with the classics or, subverting them, I'm all for that, but only when it's led by artists from marginalized communities, artists from the communities that a piece impacts. I'm not trying to see white people remix Madame Butterfly right now. I'm not trying to see them remix Aida into something. Because those pieces have barely even seen, what happens when people of marginalized communities get to produce them. We've barely seen what all Asian creative team doing Butterfly looks like. And I'm sure it's been out there, but we need to increase the visibility there first. I agree completely. If we're going to get wild with it, it needs to come from us.
I agree, because then you end up having situations where it's we're going to take, was it Faust, and have an all Latinx cast and set it in a detention center at the border, and it's all of a sudden it's just okay, well, we're just going to increase Black and brown suffering, and put all of these Black and brown bodies in degradation, and it's just no, that ends up being the default, and I'm tired of it. That's why we have this pure Black joy segment at the end of our shows. I'm tired of seeing it. I'm tired of seeing sort of this glorification of violence against women, violence against us as Black folks and people of color. I'm sick of it, and that ends up what I feel whether it's physical violence or emotional violence, I feel that ends up being the default. And and I think about why is it that yes, the music is beautiful, Don Giovanni is a beautiful piece, but it's about a rapist, and yes, he gets his just desserts at the end, but at the end. And throughout the entire rest of the piece, it's just this glorification of violence against women. Why are we okay with that in 2021? Why would anyone not want to push back against that?
And I think that this is the thing, right? People are trying to figure out, how do you push back, right? And how do you have conversations around art that is inconsistent with our current values, right? When you want to take the art and be able to highlight the pieces of it that should be highlighted, right? The aesthetic qualities that you're interested in bringing to the fore, some of the messaging, and then what do you do with the rest of it? How do you talk about it, right? Because so many things are just locked in their own time. And, where I sit, it doesn't mean we never do these things again. It instead means that we do them and we talk about why we're doing them. We talk about what is problematic. We don't run from it. We highlight. This is part of the lesson that we need to be taking from this. This is where we can sort of exist in a space and have some complicated conversations around what our values are. That to me is what is interesting about art. It pushes us to a place where we actually talk about what it is to be human, what it is to be flawed, but we don't have to sit in celebration of it. And, not to get on a crazy tangent, but that was my thing when Hamilton came out a couple of years ago, and being trained as an historian of people of color here in America, like I had a lot to say about like the unproblematic presentation of these Black and Latinx men, you know, sort of celebrating these people who were slaveholders and in some instances rapists and you know the whole nine, sort of unproblematically, right? You know, whatever else George Washington did that was amazing, he is also someone who spent like the last 15 years of his life trying to get back a young Black woman named Una Judge, who was a slave of his, who ran away and escaped and legally had the right not to be reclaimed, right? And that's the thing that I am very interested in talking about if we're going to have a very talented Black man playing the role of George Washington. Like, I can't separate those things. I can still take Lin-Manuel Miranda's really thoughtful, beautiful work and celebrate the pieces of it that should be celebrated, but at no point do I want to pretend like I think Alexander Hamilton is any kind of hero, despite the fact that there's a statue of him on the campus of my college. You know, like, I still feel like I really want to have that whole conversation, and I would want to do that even if this were, you know, a piece about a queer Black man. Like, I would still want to, you know, push back on any kind of like valoration of things that that person may have done that were negative. Like, this is not something that I think is, you know, confined to how we have to look at white men right now. I think this is what art is about, right? Thinking about the multitude of things that make us human, good, bad, or indifferent. And I hope we can do more, like, as an art form, as people who are in opera, to really push the fact that this is a piece now of presenting works irrespective of what they are. We do need to talk about what it is that we're putting on and what we're seeing and what kids are going to take away. Young people who don't necessarily have the, you know, historical frameworks or the experience to see something and then watch Don Giovanni and be able to have some kind of critique about like the gender dynamics that are very, very present to some of the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, and we're back, everyone. It's time for our last segment of our first show. Yay. Oh my gosh. It feels like history. Oh my goodness. We're gonna come back to this like when we're seasoned podcasters, season 37. We're like, oh, listen to when we were little babies, little baby podcasters. But we like to end the show on a note of pure Black joy, PB&J, a little snack for your soul. And you know, we just want to highlight Black people, organizations who are doing really great things and who are just making us happy and share that happiness with all of you. So, Lee, I'll turn it over to you for this week's PB&J.
Yeah, so this is something that I actually just read about a few days ago. There's a man named Thaddeus Miles, an African-American gentleman in the Boston area who's actually the director of housing services, I believe, at Mass Housing. And he has launched what is called the Black Joy Project, which originated when he sent a picture of him and 4 friends, all of whom are African-American gentlemen, just laughing. Like, they were clearly in the middle of a conversation, and I feel like it's a thing that I have seen a million times. It reminds me of, like, seeing my dad chatting with his friends about things back in the day, and they're just all laughing, right? And he just started about maybe a year ago emailing the picture around to other folks, just sharing it, because it was one of those things, right, that when you see it, you can't help but smile. And it sort of launched this whole project where other folks are doing similar things, and there's actually like a photo contest associated with like who's capturing the most interesting expressions of Black joy. And like, I've seen a couple of them and they did nothing but make me happy. And I feel like, considering how much we really have to sit with Black suffering, it coming from a variety of fronts, right? And I do think it's an important thing that we really do have to talk about in our country, because it is part of the Black experience. But it's not the only part, right?
No,
and those
absolutely not.
Exactly. And those moments where you can see something that part of being Black is having a lot of fun, right? Enjoying yourself, sharing all kinds of things with other people who recognize things about the experience and see so many things in our culture to celebrate. And
well, that's why everybody wants our stuff. Our food, our clothes, our music. Yeah. It's super fun.
Yeah. It's lit.
Exactly. You know, I used to have this shirt 20 pounds ago that said, "I love being Black." And I don't even need to find it. I have no idea where the shirt is. If I find it, it would be totally inappropriate at this level. But one of the things that I used to love wearing that shirt, because I would put it on and other Black people, just as I'm passing in Harlem, would smile or point or frequently say, "Where'd you get that shirt?" And I think that anytime there are these things that come up that are just reminders of the fact that being Black, whatever else it entails, it is a tremendous amount of fun. I love Black people. I love being around Black people. Living in Harlem for the last 20 years has been such a joy. And, you know, I am really going to be seeking out a lot more of these kinds of things, like that are just pure expressions of the other side of being Black that I feel like isn't regularly captured by journalists, right? So I encourage everybody to look this up and to celebrate what Mr. Miles has done, because I think, you know, it's a really awesome thing, especially considering some of what's happened in the last couple of years, just to see like a pure, unadulterated, and kind of unexplained expression of Black people being happy.
Aww.
Oh, I love that.
That reminds me of a viral tweet I saw one time that said, "I love being Black. It's kind of dangerous, but it's fun."
You know, and I think it's just so important. You know, I feel like around the time that 12 Years a Slave came out, I said to myself that, like, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I can't go into a theater and I just can't watch Black people, Black bodies just get destroyed anymore. And that's part of, you know, my whole sort of approach to 2021, where I've given up alcohol and refined sugars and I'm working out as much as possible, because like I want to destroy white supremacy. I don't want to destroy myself.
How about that?
With all of those things. And so I just think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to put that out into the world, just Black joy and Black laughter and Black excitement. And I think it's a big part of like why the three of us are here in this space and why I'm so excited. Yeah. There's that word again. To be doing this with the two of you, because it brings me pure Black joy.
Yes, absolutely.
Aww, the feeling's mutual.
Well, I think, why don't we end this on a high note? This virtual group hug. And thank you all so much for joining us for our first episode. I hope you will join us for many, many more. We will be back in 2 weeks for more of this. Yes. Conversations about being people of color in these predominantly white opera classical music spaces, and bringing you these moments of pure Black joy. And I can't wait to see where this journey and this conversation takes us.
Absolutely.
So thanks again. Make sure that you subscribe, leave a comment so that other folks can find us. Give us a rating, whatever all those other things that people say on podcasts at the end. I will write this down next time. And not try to do this off the dome. But thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.